Let's go. Episode 3, 1867 Sports Show, coming for you from the Great White North up here in Canada. Kyle and Kyle are back with the prestigious Dine Sports Group and the 1867 Sports Show. Kyle, what's up, buddy?
What's better than one Kyle? Two Kyles, right? So we're bringing you double the Kyle that a normal diet normally recommends here.
I mean, I agree to a certain extent, but it's kind of like the no homers club. I mean, we can have one, we just can't have two.
Yeah.
Um,
It's going to turn
but like,
into a game of Highlander over here. There can only be one of us left standing.
yeah, yeah. I was gonna say, did you see that thing where they had like a gathering of Kyles in Kyle, Texas,
No,
like
there's a
2 years
convention
ago?
we've been missing out on all these years.
Apparently, we didn't get the invite, but it
Uh,
was a it's a gathering of Kyles in Kyle, Texas. And I
and
remember
what
one of my
goes
buddies,
on with all these Kyles are under one roof? What happens?
a lot of Red Bull and a lot of fighting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh man, lot of Brads and Chads got together there for a convention all on the East Coast. The Kyles go down south. Okay.
Yeah, and it's just a lot of shirtless dudes, just ripping Monster Energy
Living their
drinks
best
and
life.
just get your dirt bikes out and just let her rip. You're
Okay.
silly if you don't think I'm going to send it.
Well, there you go. So that'll be where we'll have our 100th episode. We'll make it coincide with the Kyle convention down in the deep south there.
Okay, so I know, guys, we're Canadian. However, here's the plan. We're going to do it down in the heart of Texas.
We'll organize a Greyhound bus or something to go down there. We'll bring some Canadian Kyles with
You know,
us.
no, you know what we should do is we should actually go down there and conduct Canadian sports trivia down in Texas to see how well they do. I think that would
Yeah.
be hilarious.
Yeah. Watch them bat like 14 for 100.
I wouldn't even that's a pretty aggressive line, man. I would
Yeah.
say they're going to go 7 or 8 out of 100.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, never know, never know. But lots going on over the weekend for sure. Big weekend in sports, and
Big
I'll,
weekend in TO.
oh man, the center of the Canadian sports universe right there this weekend. You had some UFC going on. You had a little
Yeah.
bit of MLB news. You had the
Hmm.
Raptors making a few spicy trades and whatnot. So where do you want
Oh,
to start
okay.
with
I,
this?
I, I see what you did there. Okay, I see where you're going.
You're picking
Well, I
up
like
what
to
I'm
cut.
putting down. There you
I'm
go.
picking up what you're putting down. I like the cut of your jib on that one. So, we touched on it in the first couple of episodes, but I mean, let's kind of go full circle with this thing. The Pascal Siakam trade. Now, before we get into it, let's just give you the honorary golf clap for not only saying that he will get traded within the week, but to the team that you said he was going to get traded to. I mean, Indiana lands Pascal Siakam in pretty significant deal for both sides. But I mean, hey, kudos to you for calling that week one, buddy.
There we go. All right, 2 episodes in, we're doing victory laps already. We're our head's not going to be able to fit through the door to record episode number 4 here. So buckle up because we're going to get our fair share of stuff wrong. Got to praise the stuff we get right every now and then.
You know what? Even if we get it wrong, we can edit it out, so we're always batting 1,000.
Yeah, there you go. But I mean, it was an interesting trade, right? Because it kind of gives you a little bit of insight into what Masai and that front office kind of thinks of their team right now. And
Yeah.
I mean, Bruce Brown, not Bowen, took us a couple episodes, but we got the name right there.
No, 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 not us.
Yeah.
Don't loop both Kyles into this. It's one
Yeah.
Kyle that
Oh,
has a
yeah,
problem
we'll,
with it.
we'll wait for the Oklahoma City segment to queue up there for your moment of the sun. But I mean, Bruce Brown again, he's going to be a type of player that is going to still be very attractive to a lot of teams leading up to the February 8th NBA trade deadline. And he spoke to the Toronto press essentially saying like, listen, I'm not demanding a trade. I'm not putting it out there. If I get flipped again, I get flipped. If I don't, I'm happy to be here, right? So he's saying all the right things, but let's call it what it is. Like, if he isn't flipped, I would be very shocked based on kind of where this rebuild or retool or whatever you want to call it kind of is right now. And, you know, Pascal, obviously a huge part of the Toronto Raptors, and now that he's gone, Chris Boucher is the lone holdover from
Yeah,
their 2019 squad there.
it's
So,
crazy.
man, how quickly things change in the span of less than 5 years. One man
What
left
what
standing here.
what was it that was it Hoops Magazine where they had where the Raptors running back and you're looking at all the players on the cover of the 2020 article and it's like Serge Ibaka, Marcus Gasol, Kyle Lowry, Norman Powell. Like you're looking at Fred VanVleet, all those guys, Pascal Siakam, and it's like none of those guys are left anymore.
No.
And then, but that's the reality of professional sports. I mean, that's just what happens. Like you have to go through those cycles in order to again build up something towards a championship. If you're not, consistently running for that championship. I mean, obviously, Golden State kind of set the precedent for this is how you keep a team together while also winning a championship with different pieces every year. But not everyone can be that way. So I mean,
If we could all just be Golden State, wouldn't that
yeah,
just be nice there?
yeah. I mean, it's easy to do, guys. I mean, figure it out.
Yeah. But yeah,
But yeah,
it's very true too, right? Because even look at it today. Trade just happened today. Kyle Lowry, who already went down to the Miami Heat, he's just
yep.
got flipped up to shot. He's probably going to either get bought out or he'll get
Oh,
flipped
for
at the
sure.
deadline as well too. But it's indicative of where the Raptors are at right now, and I was a little bit surprised with the return in the sense of okay, you look at Brown, probably going to get flipped for something else as
Hmm.
well too ahead of the trade deadline there. Jordan Nwora, Kira Lewis Jr., two first rounders in 2024 and one in 2026. So it's showing you number one that the 2024 picks are important because they'll allow them to retool quickly, right? Like this isn't a Clippers, Oklahoma City. We've got all your picks from now until the end of time, but we'll accrue them, year over year over year over year. Like two getting selected next year, two more darts in the arsenal they can throw at the board and hope that they hit something. They're going to be quasi late rounders, probably in the 20 plus range there. So
Hmm.
it could be another OG kind of diamond in the rough there, or it could be whiffs that we never even see them strap
Right.
up for an NBA game. So it's interesting that they went the pick route, though. I'm glad they secured them for next year, but I am overall I kind of give it a B plus because I am
Hmm.
a little bit disappointed that rather than really holding out for some of the three young talents that I kind of mentioned in the other episode there of, a Nemhard, of a Matherin, of a Walker, they kind of just went with, all right, here's this already expendable asset that Indiana has that they're really only throwing it in there to make the salaries match at this point, and a kind of treasure trove of picks because I don't know if you've ever seen, Kira Lewis Jr., probably a nice guy, but nothing to write home about right there. So I don't think either one of the prospects are ultimately going to pan out all that well. So it's what can you turn Brown into at the deadline and the two picks next year. So I would have liked them to have gotten at least one exciting young piece back, but at the end of the day, too, probably batted above what they would have done if they went right up to the trade deadline there and then had to make a panic move because you cannot allow Siakam to still be a member of the
Yeah.
Raptors on February 9th.
Yeah. 100%. Like we talked about that about getting something back for for your investment. And that's the key thing, not letting your asset depreciate so that way they leave for nothing. So, I mean, this kind of goes back to the old saying, like, what can Brown do for you? Right. So, I mean, you look at, Bruce Brown being that central piece that came back in the move along with the three picks. I mean, I think this is kind of that situation of, well, Brown's coming in here to really showcase his skills to get reflipped over to another contender before the deadline. That being said, you look at what the potential returns would be for him. I mean, you're looking at maybe a first round pick plus a young asset.
Mm-hmm.
So really, in the grand scheme of things, Bruce Brown now becomes that additional first round pick, which makes it four first round picks coming back for Pascal Siakam, plus some salary matches, plus maybe a young asset that they can use going forward. So if you break it down like that, it actually works out to be a little bit more palatable.
Hmm.
Um, Especially given the sense like you just mentioned that he's leaving at the end of the season regardless, because I think Toronto has made that determination, or they would have signed him to an extension long ago.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I'm in the same category as you. Obviously, you want to see your team get that huge return back for a big player like a Siakam. I mean, I think everyone is excited about the OG and Obi trade, not as much with the Pascal Siakam trade. But again, we won't know until those picks can either get moved, traded, or used, and the players develop into something big. Because I mean, let's remember we mentioned OG being a late pick. Pascal Siakam was also the 25th overall pick in his draft class.
Yeah.
So it's not to say that you can't find another player like that, especially when you've shown a tendency to find later, later assets that become better players. So, I mean, the size really shown that him and his front office know what they're doing. They know how to build a championship team, and they're not afraid to make a move to improve their team. Because I mean, who knows? Maybe they take some of these picks and they trade them for a higher pick in this year's draft. They trade them for younger assets, down the road. They could package it with one of their current players to upgrade a position, right? So,
Yeah.
a number of different things that they could do. But yeah, I think overall, not exactly what you expect, but not nearly to the extent of, let's say the Vince Carter trade
Yeah.
back in, 2005.
The poo
So,
poo platter from New Jersey there.
yeah, two first rounders and two extreme journeymen, and one who isn't even going to play in the NBA anymore. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you look at the two extremes. Like, could it have been that bad? Absolutely, but they did get some good return, especially with a front office that, again, shows that they know what they're doing in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. And the the ironic thing here is you got to keep in mind I'll get to the current rumor du jour about potential destination for our friend Mr.
Oh,
Brown there.
here we
But
go. We're gonna go. Prediction number two. Kyle's just gonna knock it out of the park.
well, we'll see. We'll see if we can keep this hot streak going there. But the rumor du jour is the New York Knicks have already inquired about Mr. Brown's availability. Now, what kind of package comes back? It's kind of floated out there. You could be looking at like a Fournier coming back to make the salaries match, and then kind of Quentin Grimes and a little bit of draft capital getting sprinkled in there to make it all work out, which isn't a bad return, but you know New York hasn't exactly blown the doors off as far as playoff success. So do you really want to just start migrating that entire roster up north? But that's a conversation for another day. But what's interesting there to keep in mind is these are two franchises that are currently suing each other and have an
Litigation.
open
Yeah.
lawsuit going on about tampering and who got access to what documents when a staffer
Yeah.
joined the Raptors. And prior to that even happening, these are two teams that hadn't made a trade with one another in a decade. And now we're looking at potentially having two major, like not just, 11th person on the bench type role players, like two major trades in under a month, essentially. So,
Yeah.
one to keep an eye on for sure. But yeah, where there's smoke, there's usually fire. And our good friends, the Knickerbockers, there are circling around Masai's office quite a bit lately.
Yeah. And again, it's funny that we come back to the New York thing because I think Bruce Brown's actually come out and said, like, I'm exactly the type of player that Tom Thibodeau likes to play. So,
Well, they
obviously,
targeted him this offseason,
yeah,
but
I know.
Indiana ultimately gave him more money. So
Yeah.
he's been on
Yeah.
their radar for a while.
And the other team that you hear Brown being kind of targeted to is the Lakers. Because obviously they're always looking to improve and make
Who
that one
isn't
last
linked to
run.
the Lakers at some
100%.
point?
New York and LA are always linked to somebody in any sport.
Yeah.
But the one name that I'm hearing that might be coming back in a potential move with Brown up there is Rui Hachimura,
Hmm.
who I saw a lot of last year during the playoffs. And I love his game. A little bit of an undersized power forward, kind of like a small power forward hybrid, but kind of what Pascal Siakam brings to the table, right? He's a little bit, he's not as athletic as Pascal, but he's a better shooter.
Hmm.
So, that's one thing that I think Hachimura could be a good piece for, Toronto to get back because not only is he young, he's under contract for the next 4 years at a reasonable salary.
Yeah.
especially given the makeup of your team. You're getting a big back after you moved a big for a shooting guard.
Yeah.
So it's kind of that musical chairs thing where it's like, all right, well, let's just move this over here, and this guy's 5 years younger, so let's put him over here. This guy has a couple more years on his contract, we'll move him over here. And again, going back to this, full scale analysis. I mean, professional sports in a nutshell, man. It's
Yeah.
it's moving deck chairs around to hopefully hit the jackpot, and yeah, we'll see what happens in the second week of February.
Well, can't wait for us to have the oh, here's Rui and D'Angelo Russell have been traded to Toronto, and now next week we're speculating as to where's Toronto going to flip D'Angelo Russell now in the process.
Yeah, yeah, and again, it just keeps us, with topics that we can always speak about every week. So keep them coming, Toronto.
Yeah, God bless the Toronto Raptors for giving us at least one segment a week here.
You're giving us a good start here, boys. Keep her
Yeah.
going. Um, but yeah, I mean, so we'll wrap that one up. But again, kudos to you for calling the Toronto to Indianapolis, to the Indiana Pacers. This is the Oklahoma City argument all over again.
Yeah.
Um, but again, good on you for that. But staying in Toronto, I mean, we're seeing the Raptors make moves and kind of rebuild for the future. There's another team that's playing in that city that I think everybody kind of revolves around, but also hates with their core. Even their hardcore fans hate them because they're just so frustrating to watch. Because no matter how good they look on paper, they just always seem to be the same team every year. And of course, if you haven't figured it out by now, we're talking about the Toronto Maple Leafs. So I think they've kind of turned it around since you and I had first talked about bringing them up on the podcast. But you know, what's going on with them? Like, we talked about the winning franchises last week with Winnipeg and Vancouver. Now we're looking at a team like Toronto, who, if you look at them on paper, it's like these guys should win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
No questions asked. In the offseason, they bring in two of the most underrated signings with Max Domi and Tyler Bertuzzi, thinking that, well, this is exactly what they need. They need that sandpaper to get them past that, hump they've been unable to get over the last, 10, 15 years. So we can blame the goalie, we can blame the defensive system, we can blame the coach, we can blame the front office for, spending way too much money on four players. In your mind, like, what's their deal? And where do you see them going from here?
Well, got some opinions on the Toronto Maple Leafs here. So how much time do we got?
Totally unbiased opinions, by the way. Totally unbiased
Yeah,
opinions.
yeah. Ignore the fact that we are an Ottawa-based podcast there, but I mean, the Maple Leafs really are essentially just the Buffalo Bills of the NHL at this point, where on paper look like world beaters, but if you can get one round out of them, you know how the story is going to end. Like it's just playing the same song on repeat. And you know what? Like, kudos to the front office for at least trying to bring in a different type of player in the off
Yep.
season, right? Because you've got all the offensive firepower you should possibly need between Marner, Matthews, Tavares, Willie Nylander, right? Like, so you didn't need to go out there and try and bring in another 40 goal scorer or something like that. So they try and bring in a little bit of sandpaper, a little bit of a different role player there in Bertuzzi, in Domi this offseason. The other, well, we can run through all of them one by one here, but Klingberg, Reeves, Gambrell, Jones, Benoit, like different types of players than what have been on their roster that has resulted in those either first round or hey, we finally made it out of the first round, but then quickly fizzled out in the
Yeah.
subsequent round of the last couple of playoffs. So Toronto fans are 110% entitled to being frustrated with this team because it is just continually the same thing occurring over and over again. But it goes back to almost like what we were talking about the other week with, well, how would Zion do up north of the border? That it takes a certain type of player, at least in
Yeah.
hockey, to play in that Toronto market.
Sure.
And you can have all the talent in the world, but I think you're kind of seeing that you can throw whatever money or term or whatever you want at it. Some players just cannot produce in that environment. And
Yeah.
they really have essentially just whiffed on every single one of their signings except for Martin Jones, who I think they thought was just going to be a depth piece to begin with, but has kind of been forced into this role
He's
based on their
holding
other
it together,
goaltending.
man. Yeah,
So, like here, I'll quickly run through it. Tyler Bertuzzi, 6 goals, 14 assists in 45 games played, making a heck of a lot of money to be less than, half a point a game producing right there. Max Domi, 4 goals, 20 assists in 45 games played. John Klingberg's only suited up for 14 games, 5 assists during that time. Ryan Reeves, that even when he was originally signed for 3 years, raised some eyebrows as far as like, do you really need to throw term at an enforcer, right? But
yeah,
putting that aside for a minute there, a goal in 21 games played, and now he's been in the press box quite a bit. And ask any Toronto Maple Leafs fan whether they think, they're a better club with Reeves in or out of the lineup. He's a nice piece to just have behind glass, break in case of emergency and, playoff series. If someone's taking some liberties with some of your big guns, maybe you suit him up for the next game and send a message, but isn't someone that you're going to be relying on to play any kind of steady minutes on a given night. Dylan
yeah,
Gambrell straight to the AHL. Martin Jones, we already touched on there. Simon Benoit, 31 games played, an assist. So,
yeah,
like, the players they brought in a bubble, you would think, wow, look at what the Leafs did this offseason. And they addressed that one thing that the media, that their detractors, that even other executives around the league, they always do these anonymous polls of executives or coaches and whatnot. And time again, the feedback on the Leafs is they're soft, they're easy to play against, right? You get them in a seven, they can beat you on any given night in the regular season,
yeah,
but get them in a 7-game series, you'll wear them down. And so they tried to address it, but they've just whiffed on it. And so it all comes back to, you know what? At their core, I think the front office needs to start looking more at, let's put aside what the advanced stats say. Let's put aside what they did with their previous club. You need to start doing some more homework as far as, can this player exist in the hyper active media circus that is the Toronto hockey scene?
yeah. And 100% agree with you. And I mean, I think it goes deeper than just the players too. You have to be a certain type of personality as a coach
Yeah.
in order to thrive in a market like a Toronto. Because again, the media scrutiny is so vast.
Yeah.
Like you're going to hear it from, every Tom, Dick, and Harry who's got the little podcast like we're doing. But you're also getting the National Post. You're also getting the Toronto media. You're also getting every extension of TSN, ESPN, who's at literally the epicenter of where you're at. So, I mean, there's no escaping. And unless you're one of these old school grizzled coaches who just don't give you know what about any negative feedback, it's going to affect you.
Mhm.
And I mean, you look at how gray Sheldon Keefe's hair's gotten since he started coaching with Toronto. I mean, that's not a coincidence. I mean, the stress that guy's probably under is immense, especially because he
Kudos
doesn't
to
have
him
an
for even
institution.
still having hair at this point, let alone
100%.
gray.
And yeah, I mean that's in and of itself. But I mean, he doesn't have that security blanket anymore
Yeah.
with Kyle Dubas, right?
Yeah.
So he's pretty much at the mercy of everyone, including ownership, including Brad Treliving. You know, so it's got to be a situation where he's got to pull his assistants aside and they got to say, okay, guys, like we got to figure something out here and figure it out quick. It's not just let's just keep it going because we're going to get over the hump eventually. You got to figure it out now because you're skating on really thin ice right now. One, you're on the last term of your deal, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And two, you're not really exceeding those expectations that these markets want you to be in, right? So, I mean, you've got some big names out there who potentially could be good fits as a last minute replacement if Sheldon Keefe ends up getting let go, like an Ale Vino or a Bruce Boudreau, as we mentioned before. I think those are the types of coaches who really would do well in a in a market like a Toronto or Montreal or whatever it may be. So I mean, that's got to be something where I think Sheldon Keefe, really has to look at himself in the mirror and say, okay, I'm pretty much going out swinging here, and if I get knocked out, I'm getting knocked out. I'm going out my shield. So pull out all the stops, man. I mean, it's not just a matter of look, we're setting up the system. It's going to take a while for them to figure it out, and the same thing just keeps happening. Like when you've got a lead, you got to hold on to it.
Yeah.
that's the key to winning. Like you cannot give up these leads that you're giving up every single game.
Well,
So
two points here. The
yeah,
first one being, could you imagine the web gems that would come from a Bruce Boudreau as head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs there?
nothing would make us happier than just having, okay, this is another week. What's Brucey got for us now? But
What's Gabby got to say
absolutely.
tonight to the post-game media scrum there? But number two, getting back to the discussion at hand here, it really is, I think, a bit of a tipping point between the fans and the team and some of the responses you're seeing out of the coaching staff, out of the players and whatnot, as far as the fans are tired of being also rans and they want to
Yeah,
see a little, give a what at this point. But the comments that come out continually, whether it's from Sheldon Keefe, whether it's from the players themselves, like almost undermine that, right? Like
yeah,
the continue, no, everything's good, we're fine. 2-goal lead blown, 3-goal lead blown. We had 4 losses in a row where we had a lead and just couldn't hold on to it. Like it's fine. Long season. Like there's only so many times you can say that and try and
yeah,
just pass it off before it's like, huh. Maybe there is something deeper going on here because, and I'm paraphrasing the quote here, but when Mitch Marner is
yeah.
coming out after a huge loss going, we're a great hockey team. We
We play
show up
great.
every night and we're
Yeah,
playing great hockey right now. Yeah, you kind of deserve to be torn to shreds online there.
yeah,
That's not just a hypersensitive fan base. That's literally like, read the room. Are you tone deaf
yeah.
right now? Like, I don't know how someone from Leafs PR didn't grab him out of that scrum as soon as he started talking down there. Like, nope, gotta go. All right, like it
What,
really is
what, what,
speaking to the fact
what's
where
that, Brad?
yeah,
What's that, Brad? Yeah,
oh,
yeah, we're coming. Yeah,
oh,
yeah, we're
yeah.
good.
Sorry, you're breaking up. I'm going through a tunnel right now. Sorry, but honest to God, like when was the last time? I actually think it would behoove Sheldon Keefe to throw a water bottle on the ice, to carve someone up on the bench, to
Yeah,
show a little bit of a pushback because the fans are looking for it because he's you definitely as a player you want an even keeled coach. Like you don't want to be like, all right, is he gonna lay into someone? Is it a bag skate today? Is it a whatever? And over the course of a season that plays out. But when malaise starts setting in
yeah,
and you don't have a coach that's kicking you in the rear end to get moving, well, you know what? Maybe your time there has kind of run its course at this point.
yeah. And I mean, look, maybe when Sheldon Keefe originally came up, it was a good match with the roster that they had in place. Now you look at the changes that they made, we've already touched on those. Maybe this is not the type of coach that he is, where he can work with a more, sandpaperish team that, tries to do things a little bit differently than just high paced, up tempo offense. So yeah, I mean, I think that, like you're saying, the Leafs fan base has every right to be frustrated and every opportunity to come out and say, like, okay, what are we doing here? Because it's the same thing over and over again. But the good thing with them is that, one, they've got that new base as a GM. So again, looking at it from a fresh perspective, I brought in some of these guys. It's not really working, but they're my guys, so I'm going to take ownership of that. But everything else that I inherited, well, they're up for debate right now. So I think that's good because now you've got a little bit of, all right, we've got some buttons being pushed on this side, buttons being pushed on this side. Let's meet in the middle somewhere and get this thing back on track. And then, yeah, at the end of the day, like I said, I think you can take some motivation because I think really how you're built is kind of like we were talking about last week with the Vancouver Canucks. You know, you were getting some solid goaltending now because I mean Martin Jones, like you're saying, he's kind of holding the bridge together with popsicle sticks at the moment, but he's ultimately winning some games for them. And you look at kind of how they're top heavy with not a lot of secondary scoring.
Yeah.
But the problem with Toronto is they're not scoring nearly as much as Vancouver is, and their secondary scoring is non-existent, whereas Vancouver's is pretty much on par with their top line. So, I mean, you have the template right there to kind of say, okay, what are they doing that we're not doing, right?
Yeah.
And I think if you can kind of model what you're doing based on what Rick Tocchet's done with the Vancouver Canucks, you might start seeing a little bit more success based on the personnel that you've got. for sure.
Yeah. I mean, Vancouver does have the benefit of having a little bit more, I guess, of a blue line to lean on, right? Because you look at the depth chart of Toronto: Riley, Brody, McCabe, Liljegren, Benoit, and Timmins. I mean, if you're going to point to an Achilles heel as far as what's
Yeah,
preventing this team from becoming a Stanley Cup contender, well, number one, Samsonov, he's back in the NHL. He's got 2 games under his belt, allowed 3 goals against Detroit, 1 goal against Seattle. He's 1-1. Hey, doesn't look shell shocked out there. So baby
yeah,
steps. Don't trot him out for back to backs anytime soon. But maybe he can regain some of that career high form that he had last season, and then you've got
yeah,
a shot at it, right? But the blue line for years has been their Achilles heel, and that's going to happen when you're spending as much money as they are on
for
four
sure.
or five forwards up front there. But at the same time, too, if you're the GM, right, you're handing out all these multi-year contracts. It's not gonna be Austin Matthews or Nylander or Marner that's
Hmm.
getting traded at this point. Like, you got to make some of these deals around the peripheries, and to maybe make a local reference here, like I would love to go out and just grab a beer with DJ Smith. He seems like a great guy to sit down and just talk hockey with. But I don't want him as a head coach. Like, he served a purpose. He was the guy to be there to insulate the kids during a rebuild and get them to
Yeah,
where they are now. But he is not the guy to get them to where they need to go. Right? He can evolve as a coach down the line, and maybe he will kind of have a long, lucrative NHL career in front of him. But in terms of where he was with this team, he needed to go. I feel like we're at that point now with Sheldon Keefe, where he's gotten them to this point where they are a regular season powerhouse. They're making the playoffs. They finally exercised the demons of never being able to make it past the first round. He's gotten them to the second round. Maybe they may even, win a first round matchup again this year. Hey, back to
yeah,
back years of the second round of the playoffs. But unless they go out there and make a deep run this year, I have to imagine you've got to come to the same conclusion as far as I think the message has gotten a little stale in that locker room at this point.
yeah. To wrap it up, look, it's worked well for Edmonton.
Yeah,
It's worked well for Edmonton. So, yeah, let's see what happens the second half of the year with the Buds. But
happy
yeah,
trails to our friend Mr. Woodcroft out there in
yeah.
Edmonton. Yeah. Thanks for your
I
service.
mean, thank you for your service. Anyways, uh, as we mentioned at the start, we're sticking, with a very Toronto heavy episode tonight because again, lots happening in the ultimate epicenter of Canadian sports. But hey, the Blue Jays, they signed someone.
Look at that.
Go clap for the Jays.
My goodness, and it wasn't just a depth like utility
No,
infielder or anything here. Eh? They finally went out there and actually opened that Rogers vault of money that they've been sitting on.
yeah, and not only that, but like outbidding certain teams for an international star
Hmm.
in Cuban pitcher Yariel Rodriguez. I mean, anyone who doesn't know who that is, don't worry. He's not really a household name unless you're like an avid baseball fan who watches things like the World Baseball Classic. Let me tell you, I watched some highlights of this guy. I think there's a reason why they were okay letting Jordan Hicks go to free agency
Hmm.
because this is the type of guy who I think can ultimately come in and be that ultimate shutdown setup guy
Yeah,
to get them through that eighth inning towards Jordan Romano in the ninth. Or hey, let's see what his stuff looks like in spring training, and maybe once we get him up here, because there still are some visa issues. Obviously, with Cuban players, it always is a little bit of a snafu.
yeah,
But look, if this guy shows the type of stuff that he was pitching at the World Baseball Classic, he can maybe be either a rotational piece or ultimately, become a closer.
yeah.
So this is a very, very under the radar sign that I think a lot of people are kind of turning their nose up at. But look, as much as we were, poo-pooing on the Blue Jays offseason in episode one, I mean, this is the type of thing where it might not equal the level of a Shohei Ohtani, of a Juan Soto, but these are the types of signings that move the needle in regards to your team getting better as
Yeah.
a whole. So, hey, you did something. You brought in someone who I think ultimate baseball people are excited about. So let's see how this plays out in spring training, because I'm anxious to see how he looks if he comes up here.
Yeah. And again, unlike a lot of kind of the international free agents who they're playing in kind of fringe leagues, or you kind of sign them as a 16-year-old and stash them away, right? Like, 26 years old. So he is, already ready as far as his
Mhm.
development, and he's fully grown into his frame. You kind of see what he is as a prospect right now. Wiry thin could add a little bit of muscle, right? When you're standing 6'1" and only weighing 165 pounds soaking wet, okay, we could probably
Don't
do a
worry,
little.
don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it there. We'll get some poutine in his system. He'll be good to go
There
when he
you
comes
go.
up here north. But really is an impactful player who has professional experience, already having pitched over in the NPB, in the
Yeah,
Japanese professional leagues as well too, and not only pitched there but done very well there as well too.
yeah,
Like, as recently as 2022, went 10 and 10, 3.03 ERA and 79 relief appearances. And you know right-hander, 4 years, $32 million. So you're not breaking the bank to bring him in either. But it really is one of those situations where you look at what the Jays' needs were. Adding to the bullpen wasn't at the top of the pecking order, right? You need a
mhm,
DH, you need a third baseman at this point. There were other things that could have been addressed here, but this is the classic case of a front office deciding to double down on a strength, right? And really
mhm.
going from, we're really good in this area, we want to be amongst the sport's best right now,
Yeah,
right? And you look at the arms that are now coming out of that bullpen, right? You add Rodriguez in there, and there's someone who can very easily replace Hicks in that bullpen and already improve a kind of shutdown tandem and bridge towards Jordan Romano as the closer. Or if,
yeah,
God forbid, Romano gets hurt, you've now kind of got a plan B in there as well, too. So it allows them that flexibility that let's looking back on the last couple of years, it's been up and down with some of the Blue Jays starters. And oh boy, Barrios only went 3 and 2/3 innings tonight. It's going to be a bullpen night. Well, when you've got a really elite bullpen, that's not
mhm.
necessarily a bad thing, right?
No,
You look at the Tampa Bay Rays with their opener concept there, where we're not even going to throw a starting pitcher tonight. We're just gonna get all of our bullpen guys an inning and a half, and away we go. So
yeah,
doubling down on that strength really isn't a bad idea, but it doesn't mean that their off season is done. They still
no,
need to go out there and address those two big areas for sure.
for sure. And I mean, I think what's lost in here too is that you're adding Rodriguez, but you're also now getting a full healthy season of Chad Green,
Yeah.
who again was very, very effective for the Yankees. So, like you're saying, you have that double bridge that can get you to that ninth inning, where Jordan Romano's proven to be one of the game's best closers over the last 3-4 years. So, hey, having a good bullpen has never hurt anybody, and
No.
the fact that you can now have hopefully a bounce back season by your starters like Barrios and Manoa to go with those two elite starters that you have at the start,
Mhm.
with Gossman and Bassett. Now you're rolling out, hey, can we have four of our top arms actually perform like they can, plus Kikuchi hopefully having a follow up season like he had last year. So yeah, all in all, I think the pitching's the last of their concern. So I mean, you're right, 100%. They need to go out and address other things. Like you're hearing the rumors of Jorge Soler now being bandied about, with Toronto being the most likely destination for him. Would you prefer him to be a left-handed bat? Sure, but I'm not going to say no to a guy who can hit 30, 40 home runs, especially in a dome,
Yeah.
right? So look, anything that they do at this point is just gravy, because I think the Toronto sports base, the Toronto fan base has not healed from that broken heart that they suffered, a month ago. But I think they're starting to come around to the fact, like, okay, let's just rally around the guys that are already here. Maybe this allows for the elite talents that you've got in house, like the Bichettes and the Guerreros, to say, this is our team. We didn't get those other guys, but now it's up to us to say we don't need them because we can take that next step forward. So
Yeah.
hopefully it's a rallying point, and bringing in a guy like a Rodriguez can show at least a little bit of, all right, we got some sparks now. Let's get the fire, stoked a little bit more, and we can, move this thing into a positive direction going into spring training.
Yeah. Well, it's nice too because it adds a little bit of versatility to that bullpen because even when he
Yep.
had Hicks, and it's not just Hicks, it's a lot of these flamethrower type pitchers who can touch, triple digits on a radar gun, is they become so over reliant on, if I don't blow this guy away with my fastball, it's going to be a long outing for me here.
The old Ricky Wild Thing Bond special, huh?
Yeah, well, exactly. That really is it. And you kind of saw it rear its ugly head a few times last year in terms of, all right, if Hicks lost control of the strike zone, well,
Oh,
he's not sitting anyone down at that point, right? Whereas Rodriguez, he's got a mid 90s fastball all ready to begin with there, but then he also brings a slider, curveball, splitter, and changeup. Whereas Hicks,
oh,
it's
yeah,
pretty much just fastball, changeup, right?
yeah.
So you get a little bit more of extra lives, I guess, here, where if this isn't working, we can approach it this way, or we can attack this batter that way. And so that I think that was something that might have been missing a little bit from the bullpen last year.
Mhm.
And if you're going to tell me that this group is going to take even another step forward, this is why the already good pass rush teams in the NFL and in the CFL, they still continue drafting defensive linemen, even though they might have led the league in sacks the last year. Just keep stacking things on, and away you go.
I mean, you look at the two favorites to make it to the Super Bowl this year with Baltimore and San Fran. I don't think that they have guys playing more than 3 or 4 snaps in a row. So the more depth you've got, like you're saying, the more versatility you offer. And the more versatility you offer, the less chance that teams can scout you as accurately as they have in the past. So, hey, let's just be happy with this signing for what it is.
It's a baby step.
And
We're getting
it's a
there.
baby step. But you know what? It's a baby step, but sometimes it just takes that baby step to get the snowball rolling downhill. So, um, yeah. Anyways, golf clap for the Rodriguez
Hey,
signing.
they did something there.
They
That
did
meme of the
something.
guy poking it with the stick there.
Come
Come
on,
on, do something. Yeah, they
you know
did
he's going to
something.
do something. Yeah,
There we go.
exactly. All right. Uh, so, kind of wrapping this all up, and the reason why we wanted to have a Toronto themed episode tonight was pretty big UFC card in
Yeah.
uh, in the six over the course of the weekend with UFC 297 with Strickland and Duplessis. I uh, I watched some of the highlights of the fights, and I mean, overall, underwhelming.
Hmm.
Probably is the best way to put it, with a lot of decisions and a lot of inactivity. But I think the major theme of the night was Canadians didn't really do too well in the grand scheme of things on the
Well,
card.
hold on. We're gonna call a timeout on the play. The Canadian women went 2-0
Yes,
on the card.
very
The
true, very
Canadian
true.
men went over. So
Yeah,
golf clap for the Canadian
golf clap
women
for the
for
Canadian
taking
women.
care
Yeah,
of business there.
yeah. Isn't that always the case though? The Canadian
Yeah.
women, the Canadian female athletes are just running the show, and then it's like the guys are like, "All right, well, we're here too."
Yeah. Well, it had to have been a little bit disappointing because the last time the UFC came up north here, all the Canadians, regardless of gender, they ran the roughshod over the card and they performed really well. So to
Yeah,
fall completely flat in the manner in which they did, and it wasn't just like, oh well, hey, we're stacking it with Canadians here, but they're just fodder for this up and coming prospect here. Like there were a couple of them that were favored heading into those fights there that
yeah,
just, like you say, fell flat and did not perform up to
yeah.
expectation.
I mean, you mentioned it earlier with sometimes players and coaches just can't perform in the lights of a city like Toronto, and I mean, I can't imagine the pressure that's under that's on some of these UFC fighters, especially young ones
Yeah.
who are fighting for the first time in front of this massive crowd in either their home country or their home, province or home city. So yeah, I mean, you feel for them because obviously there's no lower feeling in the world, I'm sure, than getting knocked out or submitted or defeated, in front of a lot of people that are rooting on you. But yeah, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, the fact that we were able to get another card up in Canada is just showing that not only are sports like soccer and basketball and hockey expanding, you know, the combat sports landscape is an ever evolving landscape.
Mhm.
You know, you've got the UFCs, you've got boxing, you've got mixed any type of mixed martial art. You've got the WWE, that's now merged with
With the
the UFC
UFC. Yeah.
to form TKO, which is this all encompassing entity. Which again, sidebar, did you see what the WWE just announced with Netflix?
Well, two things. The Rock is now a member of the board of the TKO
Yeah,
holding group, and
yeah,
10-year, $5 billion streaming deal with Netflix there. So
yes.
again, right? People fall into one of two camps when they become adults. It's either I used to watch wrestling when I was a kid, but that's baby stuff, or John Cena. Oh my God, WrestleMania 40 is coming up here. Well, is The Rock going to fight Roman Reigns? So you fall into one of the two extremes. It's not usually people who are just indifferent to wrestling, but yeah, it was a huge, huge day. And I don't know what it closed at, but the market's only open at what, 9 a.m. for the stock exchange there? By 10 a.m., TKO's stock with those two announcements had gone up from $70 to $95.
Yeah,
Like,
which is
just
insane. Yeah,
skyrocketed. So
yeah.
hopefully you had a couple of TKO stocks tucked away in your investment portfolio there.
I did not, but in hindsight, yes, I should have.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, again, looking at where things are from a combat sports perspective, it's great to see because who knew where the UFC was going to be back when the Fertitas and Dana White, took it over. And now
Yeah.
look at where they are right now with this entertainment value that they're providing for everyone.
No
So,
longer do they have people coming to the ring with one boxing glove on, inexplicably, to have a fight.
I mean, but that was the best version of UFC when it
Yeah.
was so unpredictable, but you knew what was going to happen because it's like this guy's going to win because this guy has one boxing glove on. There's no
Yeah.
way he's going to win that fight. Um, yeah, you got like a 450-pound sumo wrestler versus a 170-pound Muay Thai guy who looked like he never lifted a weight in his life, and it's like, oh well, this is gonna happen. And then all of a sudden he gets kicked in the face and teeth
Yeah.
go flying everywhere. It's like, all right, didn't
And,
see
and
that
crotch
coming.
shots were legal. I literally
Yeah,
remember as a kid watching a fight where a fight got stopped due to just groin shots there, and he
yeah,
tapped.
like hair pulls, like everything was just on the table back then. But yeah, you see how far things have come, and I mean, from a Canadian point of view, long are the days where we just had like that one fighter where everyone just said, if he's not fighting, we don't have anyone to cheer for, which is obviously George St. Pierre. You're getting more young Canadian athletes getting into these things like mixed martial arts, like jujitsu, like boxing. They're learning a discipline because one, I think more and more people are cognizant of those self-defense techniques, but two, it's ultimately something where if you train enough at it, you can get really good at it, right?
Mhm.
So the fact that you were able to see nine Canadians fight on a Canadian card is impressive. And now let's put the record aside because obviously we won't hit on that. But um, yeah, you know, considering that there wasn't even a Canadian in the main event, I think it was overall a very well received and well regarded
Yeah.
card. Now going to the actual main event itself, um, you know, two very different stylistic fighters and two very different personalities with Sean Strickland and
Yeah.
Dricus Du Plessis. Um, yeah, I mean, Sean Strickland kind of strikes you as the old, like, I'm just going to say as much crazy shit as I can so I can sell, whatever I can and make as much money as I can, which is fine. That's the name of the game.
Yeah.
Whereas Dricus is kind of the well mannered. I'm going to dress in a suit and I'm going to be well behaved and whatnot until I say something horrible, right? And it's like I just felt it was forced a lot of that preamble up to the main event. And then in the fight itself, I mean, you look at the aftermath, it looked like it was, you know, it looked like it was a war.
Hmm.
But looking at the highlights and whatnot, it's like, yeah, like it was a good fight. You know, it was back and forth. But let's not get too overwhelmed with the whole aspect of the lead up to it, right? Because a lot of times, whenever you have those huge lead ups and people making a huge deal about, you know, oh, here what he said in the pre fight, here what he did there, those fights never live up to expectations.
Hmm.
So I kind of felt like it was forced where they wanted, they kind of knew no one's really gonna, you know, sell this fight unless we start, you know, doing some crazy stuff behind the scenes. So, I mean,
The biggest problem right now, and you know, my favorite fighter of all time was peak Conor McGregor because he would sell the fight, but then he would back it up in the ring.
yeah,
But now the problem is everyone thinks, look at how Conor got to where he is and how he
yeah,
sold these fights and how he became the richest UFC fighter of all time. And it's not even close. I've got to do that. What
mhm,
they don't realize is he was a once in a generation talent, both in the ring and on the microphone. So just because he talked a lot, the things that he would actually say and do would get under the opponent's skin. Sean Strickland was just like if Joe Rogan dropped acid and went real off the deep end as far as the conspiracy theory, tinfoil hat, government is doing this, that, and the other. That's what it
yeah,
turned into. It wasn't like, all right, I'm getting a psychological or advantage over my opponent here, where you could see like there were opponents that walked into that cage against McGregor, like Alvarez. He was beaten before that door
yeah.
even closed behind him because of the lead up to it. Not a single person in the world is intimidated by the things that Sean Strickland says, right? Like, and again, I'm not sitting here saying that like it's ever going to go away or we should take that part of it out, but like the Conor McGregor blueprint is not universally applicable to every single fighter, and I think a lot of fighters need to wake up and realize that.
Yeah, and you know, you kind of said it. Like a lot of it's manufactured. I think that's just who Sean Strickland is, to be honest. Like he's just that type of personality. So
Yeah.
it comes across as being, you know, outlandish and whatnot. But I just think that that's just who he is naturally. But going back to what I was saying, and you know, you're kind of touching on as well. You don't have to be, you know, the mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart, to get
Yeah.
people's attention, right? I mean, going back to what we were saying with George St. Pierre, the reason why he was as good as he was, the reason why Anderson Silva was as good as he was because they didn't say anything
Yeah.
because they knew people are going to watch me because I'm going to mess somebody up,
Yeah.
and they knew I'm going to beat them at their own game. So that's one of those things where you see a lot of these big talkers, and I mean the best in my mind to do it because it was one strategic and two is super hilarious with Chael Sonnen. Like you know, I that's where I kind of wanted to go with. You know, this is what I think Sean Strickland kind of comes across as like a Chael Sonnen type of personality, where it's like I'm going to say stuff that people don't agree with because I also have certain political views that a lot of people don't agree with as well. And you know, it goes without saying that just comes with the territory when you come to combat sports, right? That sells tickets. People want to see violence. They want to hear outlandish things. It's like what it's why Jerry Springer was as popular as it was when we were growing up, right? Not that you know the content wasn't good. It's just you knew something crazy was going to happen every episode. So you know, I look at a guy like Dreykus, who now is the champion, and think, you know, you kind of got pulled into Sean Strickland's world when you started talking about, you know, past abuse that he suffered, and you're going to do the same thing to him. And it's like it wasn't a good look on you because one, you don't pull it off, and two, that's not your game. Like you got to where you are because you're a talented mixed martial artist, and you could be that. You know what? I'm just going to laugh it off and smile, and people are going to come and watch me fight because of my ultimate skill in the ring, right?
Mhm.
Some people are like you're saying, some people are meant for the mic, some people are meant to actually just show up and do what they're supposed to do. So
Yeah.
if you have someone who can do both, like a John Jones or a Conor McGregor, take away all the, you know, out of the ring stuff that they go through. What they do on the mic and in the ring, if they can kind of cross the two of them, that's what makes them generational talents. So yeah, split decision ultimately was a pretty decent fight, but I don't think it really moved the needle a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. Um,
Well,
but
what
yeah,
I'm a little bit fearful of here, just as again, I'm looking down the road as far as, all right, it was a split decision. Depending which camp you fell in, if you were a casual viewer, you probably didn't really have a whole lot of opinion on
yeah,
it. Okay, whatever. I'm ready to move on from it because I'm not emotionally invested in either one of these fighters. If you're in the Strickland camp, you're, oh, they got to run it back. They got to run it
yeah,
back. There was nothing about that fight that screamed, you know what? We need to see version 2.0 of this.
mm,
Like if I'm Dana White, I really hope that they just go, okay, well, on to the next one. Who's the next middleweight challenger here that we can throw at Dreykus here? Because guess what?
yeah,
Sean, you had your shot and you kind of blew it there. So if you want to go
you
out there and
blew
you
it.
blew it. So if you want to go and string together a couple more wins and then we run it back, sure. But I don't need the straight to DVD sequel of this at
Yeah.
UFC 301 or whatever, right?
So here's what I say in regards to where you go from here with the match, matchmaking. You got a really big card, monumental card coming up with UFC 300. If you could turn around one of those guys to come back and fight on that card, great, because that's just another big name that you can add to that, potentially stacked card. I think what you have to do is you put a Sean Strickland in against a guy like a Hamzat Chimaev,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's that fight where I think Strickland can really get his belt back and maybe jump that, 2 or 3 fights to get back to that championship fight. He beats Chimaev. He's the big name everyone's talking about. That puts him right back in title contention. You've got Israel Adesanya, who's already announced that this fight kind of lit a fire underneath him. He's looking to come back and finish what they started, in the ring a couple of months ago with him and Dreykus. So yeah, I think that those are two matchmaking. Again, we talked about shuffling deck chairs around. I think that's what you can ultimately do, and then have the loser of those fights, they can fight each other as well to kind of get back on the title track as well. So I think that's where you go from there. And I mean, you talk about wanting to run things back. I think back to my own experience going to, I think it was the last card in Toronto, which was UFC 197. And I remember it like it was yesterday because every fight on that card was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I remember I looked at my brother and we were saying, I would literally watch every single one of these fights if they did a rematch, like everyone.
Yeah.
So this was at the peak of like Max Holloway when he was, running through the featherweight division. He beat Anthony Pettis for the title, and that's when he started his reign. And like that fight was fantastic. But there was a fight on the undercard between Cub Swanson and Duho Choi that I will literally remember. Everyone in the building stood up after 10 seconds
Yeah.
because within 10 seconds, they were swinging for the fences and it didn't stop until the final bell went.
Yeah.
So, those are the types of things where it's like that happened back in 2015 or 2016. Um, and again, we're talking about it 8 years later, and it's still fresh in my mind. Like those fights were so memorable and so good that I would do it all over again and watch every single one of those fights the next week.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you have to have a special moment in these championship fights to say, you know what, we need to see that again, or something where it's like, oh well, it's a no contest because someone got hit with a low blow or poked in the eye. And, well, it was starting to get good. We got to run that back and see it again.
Yeah.
When you see these split decisions where it's like, yeah, you know what, there's a lot of damage being done, but at the end of the day, it's not really one of these fights. It's like you have to see, dude, you got to come over, you got to order the pay per view, you got to check out this fight, watch the highlights tomorrow. I mean, you got some people who, like you're saying, if you're in the Strickland camp, you're following it. If you're in the Duplessis camp, you're following it. But as a casual fan, and like I'll put myself in as a casual fan at this point because I haven't really watched as much UFC as I used to.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously, like parents and being tired and
Kids and responsibilities and
who
all
wants to
that.
stay up? Who wants to stay up until 12:30 to watch a fight?
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, I mean, I think that the reason why you have these mergers with WWE, UFC, is you blend in those fan bases that can kind of get dragged over from one side to the other. So, like you're mentioning with the WWE fans earlier, where it's like, I've been watching this for years, and John Cena's back, The Rock's back, like all these guys that I used to watch when I was a teenager are now coming back. Well, maybe they'll check out the UFC card. Oh, that was actually really entertaining, really fun. These guys are saying the same type of stuff on the microphone that the WWE guys are.
Hmm.
Maybe I'll check out more of that and vice versa. So yeah, I think that they can do some good things leading up to this UFC 300, especially given the firepower that they've got now with this huge merger. So I would not be surprised in the slightest if this is just a one of a kind event that we won't see until UFC 400.
Yeah.
So, um,
I
yeah,
think
I
you're
mean,
going to
sky's
see
the
a lot more of with this big merger. I think you're going to see a lot more of these larger scale, like show around the show productions where
yeah,
by and large, right? Like we're up to 297, but outside of, maybe a bigger arena or stadium, it kind of is what it's been all the way back to UFC 1, right? Here's a cage, here's very expensive folding chairs around it, and then everyone just sits in there. And if you're anywhere behind, beyond row whatever N of section 100, you're probably watching most of the fight on the big screen jumbotron anyways, right? I,
yeah,
I think you're gonna start seeing more of these crazy like WrestleMania, SummerSlam style events where you've got not just, all right, here's the guy's music and he walks out. It's, all right, we've got a live band playing this guy out, and there's pyrotechnics and there's this and that, and we're at the Rose Bowl, or we're at, the the old
yeah,
Astrodome, or like you'll start seeing a lot more of the hype and the build up around that. And I think that's where the UFC really stands to benefit,
yeah,
because I mean, you're not going to be seeing a whole lot of athlete cross promotion, because we've seen it to varying degrees, right? You've seen Rousey, be a dominant UFC athlete and then go over to the WWE. You've seen Brock Lesnar be a dominant WWE guy, come over, win the championship in UFC, go back to WWE.
yeah,
And then you've seen CM Punk go in there, get his head caved in for 2 fights, and then never to step in a cage again. So
yeah,
I don't think there's going to be a lot of actual, or I guess, cross pollination of the athletes themselves. I think the fan bases, you might be able to sway some to and from the two of them there, but I think you're going to see a lot more of these kind of pre-packaged productions, as far as look at the show around the show, and maybe even
yeah,
starting to see some of these cards, like whatever, not a UFC 300 because it's going to be like a crown jewel event, but UFC 315 leads into, whatever. It goes from 8 till 10, and then 10 till 12 it's SummerSlam pay-per-view, and it
WrestleMania.
exactly, right? So I think you're going to see a lot more of these kind of
Yeah,
sports business synergies kind of happen. And at least for the athlete's perspective, I hope that the trickle down effect is, you've heard all of these, like, I hate even saying the name, but oh, the Logan Pauls and the Jake Pauls of, yeah, I'll do UFC once you start paying your fighters and medical and blah blah blah. I'm doing it for them. It's like, all right, you shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. But the points that you bring up, that you've clearly just been spoon fed by your agent or your
yeah,
PR person here, are valid, right? Like if you
mhm,
look at the physical toll that a mixed martial artist undergoes versus a baseball player versus a soccer player or something like that, versus the compensation of a baseball player or soccer player compared to these mixed martial artists, right? It's night and day. So I'm hoping that with the stock prices going through the roof, with these bigger packages, shows around the show, more sponsors coming in, that ultimately does trickle down, and maybe you start seeing whatever, a UFC fighter's pension plan or post-career
yeah,
medicals or stuff like that, is kind of my ultimate hope for what this merger ultimately produces.
yeah. And obviously, all good points that you've raised, and that what everybody's looking to. But what you were describing there was like the show around the show, and like live bands playing out performers. So you mean like boxing?
Well, the UFC hasn't done it, right? Everything's
They did it.
pre-recorded, and it's just a
They,
walkout from the visitors'
yeah,
change room to center ice is all it
yeah,
is in the UFC.
yeah. They did it once when McGregor fought Chad Mendes, where they had Sinead O'Connor singing, the Foggy Dew, and I forget who was singing for Chad Mendes. It was some type of country song.
Ah,
Um, yeah, it was something. Something I'm not interested in. But anyways, um, yeah, I like that aspect of it because again, the pageantry behind all this stuff, that's what draws in sponsors. That's what draws in eyeballs. That's what draws in ratings. Like we're mentioning, like fighters trying to do too much talk leading up to the fight to try and manifest, this interest. Well, this is what this does.
yeah,
It takes away all of that. And if you're good on the mic, you're going to be way more successful than someone who's not, which again is a blessing and a curse because it can launch your career, but you have to back it up.
Mhm.
And if you're not good on the mic, well, you better be able to back it up in the cage.
Yeah,
So, yeah, I mean, here's hoping for, a really eventful, year in 2024, because I think that it's going to be exciting from a couple of perspectives, especially with this Netflix announcement, especially with, these unifications and whatnot. And obviously getting a high powered, individual like Dwayne Johnson more involved on both aspects of it. So, yeah, I mean, even though UFC 297 may not have been everyone's cup of tea, this is ultimately the first card of the year in Canada.
yeah.
So let's just, put the good vibes out there that, the rest of them will be good. And, anyone listening from UFC Canada, I promise, if you come back to Ottawa, we will have the air conditioning turned on in the arena this time.
Yeah. And
I
maybe not TD Place this time.
Anyone who attended that event will tell you that was very uncomfortable. Great card. It was very entertaining, but man, was it was steamy.
Sweltering. It was
It was
sweltering.
steamy in there.
Yeah, there was some scents. There was an
Yeah.
aroma.
Yep.
Yeah, and
It,
yeah, I can taste it. Yep, yeah.
so
Suddenly the suits are a little bit weird now, guys.
that's what 15,000 people's aromas combined taste
Yeah,
like. Okay.
yeah.
But yeah, we promise anyone who's looking to bring up a card to Canada, we promise that we will have the air conditioning on full blast and it will be comfortable. It will be amazing. Put it out there.
And
Kyle and I will make sure that it happens.
that is the 1867 sports show guarantee right there. But
Um,
just pulling on just because you brought it up there. So again, I just said he obviously huge Conor McGregor fan. I've watched all of his fights there. That Chad Mendes fight was so forgettable for the simple fact that do you remember what happened immediately before that fight? Do you remember what the slugfest was that involved a very prominent
yeah.
Canadian fighter there at UFC
Oh,
189 there?
the Rory McDonald Robbie Lawler fight, and anyone who doesn't know or hasn't seen that fight, go Google it right now
Hit pause
because
on this podcast,
yeah, pause
watch
the
it, and
podcast
then come back and keep watching us.
and come back for our analysis. But yeah, you've got Robbie Lawler's lip hanging off of his face. You've got Rory McDonald's nose caved into his head,
Yeah.
and both of them are standing up going into the last round of the fight, and they're both waving each other on. It's like the movie scene that you see in Rocky, where Rocky is, if you can't see out of his eyes, he's broken, he's bent over. Apollo Creed standing up thinking he's won, and Rocky's just waving him back, like, we'll run, let's go.
Yeah.
And that's what you got in that moment. And I mean, you look at Robbie Lawler and Rory McDonald, neither guy good on the microphone.
No.
But what's the lasting impression you get from their careers?
Yeah.
That fight right there. So 100% I remember that. And the thing is, it was my bachelor party. I will be fully clairvoyant. I was a tad inebriated.
Clairvoyant, you're gonna be
Yeah.
psychic there. I think transparent was the Rolodex
Transparent.
word of the day you were
That's the
looking for
one.
there.
That's the one. Fully, I'm going to be fully ESPN.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
That's the word I was looking for. You
Yeah.
got it. There you go. And here comes the grammar police in the comment section. Oh, look at this idiot. He doesn't even know the difference between that. But yes, I'm going to be fully transparent that I definitely wasn't the I wasn't bright eyed and bushy tailed. Let's just put it that way. And I still remember every single moment of that fight in particular.
Yeah.
So the fact that you can leave that impression on someone who's only half alive, you did good.
Yeah.
You did good.
Yeah. No, that was and I think if you ask, because this was really at the height of, if for whatever reason in the early 2000s to like mid-teens there, Canada only pumped out welterweights. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, you essentially had, GSP, you had Patrick the Predator Cote, you had Rory McDonald, and they're all the same
David
weight and height and
and
everything. And
David, don't forget David Loazo,
yeah.
the one that
Oh yeah.
started it all.
Yeah. But that, if you ask any, I think, Canadian UFC fan who watched cards pretty religiously, what's on your Mount Rushmore of fights, I think you would be universally seeing that fight appear as one of the top four on a lot of people's lists, just because there was not a single down moment, right? Like even in a lot of the really great, you think whatever, John Jones versus Gustafson, or any of the classic like Couture Liddell, there's always one little, okay, well, for a minute and a half he got the takedown and then it was lay and pray and then Herb Dean stood him up or whatever, right? Like,
And there's a feeling out process a lot of the time. And yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
this was literally like, the opening bell went and someone just threw a pair of steel chairs into the ring and they just start swinging at each other there the whole time. Like it was a absolute barroom brawl, street fight. Like it was not mixed martial arts. It was, we are using our fists and I'm going to kick thusly. And if you happen to get hit, that's your own fault.
See, this is where you have the crossover. Imagine Jim Ross commenting on a UFC fight where it's like, by God, he's gonna kill him, by
He's got
God,
a
straight to
family.
hell.
He's got a family. And then all of a sudden the glass shatters and that's Stone Cold's music. He comes down and comments on some things. All of a sudden, Bret the Hitman Hart's doing stitches for Rory in the corner. Like, yeah, it's unlimited.
Yeah, I mean, the opportunities that are out there are just unlimited. You're right, and I knew you were going to say that because of my clairvoyance.
Yeah.
So,
I don't even know how I can see you right now with all this transparency you're presenting.
oh, I'm a living joke.
Oh,
Um, this is what concussions will do to you, kids. You forget the words that you want to use and use something completely different.
yeah. Me talk purdy one day.
Me fail English? That's impossible. Um,
Oh my God.
and this is the time that we get canceled.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. We're
Yeah.
winding down the episode. It's we've gotten through the turbulence, but landing the plane here.
Oh, it's
I hope
difficult,
your
but
trays are upright and your seatbelts are on, folks.
and get your clairvoyancy in order. But to bring it on home, we started off the podcast giving you the golf clap, for um, your excellent analysis on where Pascal Siakam is going to land. And I mean, we have the receipts from last week, and I want to end on this because you got your flowers and I'm taking mine. Last week I said,
Miley Cyrus over here. You can buy yourself
yeah,
flowers. Hey, look at
oh,
you.
absolutely. I'll hold my own hand.
Yeah.
But
Our listeners can tell that both of us are girl dads over here, eh?
yeah,
Just quoting
100%.
lyrics.
Oh man. But anyways, so last week I mentioned that after the Buffalo Kansas City game, the highest viewed game of the week will be Baltimore and Houston because everyone was excited to see what Houston was going to bring to the table and if Baltimore could exercise their playoff demons. And I sent you a text right before the show. It broke the ESPN record for the most viewed playoff game in the company's history. So let's get a golf clap for Big Kyle for predicting, the ever loving viewership of the NFL. I think all four games last weekend drew record ratings for every network that they were on. So yeah, I mean, I saw that you had posted on Dine Sports as well. What is it? 43 out of the 50 top,
95
watch.
out of the
Yeah,
100 most viewed broadcasts. So this is anything. We're talking presidential
yeah,
elections, we're talking
yeah,
Oscars, we're talking whatever. 95 out of 100 of the most viewed broadcasts in 2023 were NFL games.
yeah,
3 of the other ones were college football games, and
yeah,
and then it was the arts and culture of the world. So
yeah, yeah,
anyone who wonders why, Apple is gonna probably pay billions of dollars the next time rights are coming up for NFL football, or hey, CFL, you guys play some football too. Sell yourselves better. Like, people are tripping over themselves to get this live content, and we could do an entire episode on it, so I won't go. I'll
yeah,
save my rant for another day here.
yeah,
But all you have to say is 10 years, $5 billion, and this isn't even for pay-per-views, it's for Monday Night Raw,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So, like, live sports is the only thing keeping cable alive right now.
yeah, exactly. And going back to the viewership game with Baltimore and Houston, there is a Canadian tie there, so we're not just kind of straying off from it. John Mechie, obviously a great story. We'll talk about him on a future episode because his story is incredible. So again, from Ontario, and then Baltimore has two Canadians on their roster, with Tavius Robinson and Carl Urban, who are both holding it down in the defensive line. So
I thought you were gonna
again,
go with the Baltimore of the old CFL when there was that little brief foray
oh,
in there.
Anthony Calvillo, Mike Pringle, come on. You got Donnie Matthews roaming the sidelines, Jim Pop up in the booth, classic. Um, but yeah, that's the Canadian tie into that. So anyone who wants to question our authenticity with this being a Canadian show, you got it. So anyways, I think that's all we wanted to cover for tonight, man. So anyways, onward and upward, and let's get what city you want to cover next weekend?
Yeah, we'll just do a traveling circus here of all right, it's gonna be Yellowknife tonight here. What was going on there? Well, drunk
Well,
Pete fought Toothless
yeah,
Bill.
it'll be like the little 2 minute short episodes. We'll kind of sprinkle those in between the longer episodes weekly.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll end on this note right here, because we do have some news. We're gonna tease it
We
right
got
now.
some news.
We wanted to start it off with a little bit of flow. All right, the two Kyles, they're gonna break down things for the first 3 episodes. Moving forward, though, you guys might see some guest appearances starting to happen here. We won't name names or anything right now. You got to stay tuned and whatnot, but we will be bringing in some current, former athletes, coaches, executives, and whatnot. So if you're 3 episodes into this and you're starting to get tired of our voices, we're,
Of
we're, we're
our
gonna
shtick.
mix things up just a little bit moving forward as well too.